Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, which is going up a tad late today because I was up very late last night reviewing the Batman v Superman teaser for a teaser. And we had a lot of fun. I'm very excited for the full trailer to debut on Monday, and of course later today, in just a few hours, or actually any minute now by the time this gets rendered and uploaded, we'll be potentially getting a Star Wars trailer. And I have to say, this is not only a lot of fun to have these very exciting properties finally realized on the big screen that we've been waiting on for so long, but I think it's kind of good to prove that there's other people who can make movies like this besides Marvel. I mean, I love Marvel movies. I'm so excited for Avengers Age of Ultron, but I don't think a monopoly is fun for everyone. A healthy little competition does good things, you know. It gives us more content, and I think it keeps everybody on their toes. So I'm excited. You know, Marvel's dominated for so long. I'm really happy to see some other players enter the game in such a strong fashion. Alright, so let's talk about today's morning movie news. It might be a little shorter than usual, although every time I say that, it's the same length, so we'll see. But we've got three very good stories, and I almost skipped morning movie news today because I was like, I gotta get back on track with my schedule. But then I thought of the stories we have to discuss, and they're too good to pass up or to wait to discuss until tomorrow. So the first one, of course, that many of you tweeted me about was that Warner Brothers has wasted no time in replacing Michelle MacLaren on Wonder Woman. They were like, wow, this story made us look horrible. Even with the talking tiger, people still went out and did the old feminism thing. And you know, I'm a strong, I really strongly support women in the industry, but I don't think that they should get, unfair advantages, or they should have special allowances. For instance, on a side note, there's a petition right now to get a woman on the $20 bill here in the United States. And to that I say, hey, we only put presidents on our money, and if women want to be on the $20 bill, one of them should become president. And by the way, in terms of non-white dudes being on money, I believe Barack Obama is first in line, so why should a woman go on the 20 as like some act of compassion when you have an actual president who would add some diversity to the lineup and would still also be a legitimate inclusion. But anyway, so I don't like the idea that people are like, well, this just proves that women can't direct blockbusters. And it's like, hey, as we discussed yesterday, if she really suggested a talking tiger, then to this point, women can't direct blockbusters. And you know what's going to stop that? If one does. So, looks like now we have another one up at bat, and that's Patty Jenkins. Which is interesting because everybody was floating around this Angelina Jolie story as well. As soon as Michelle MacLaren got, they parted on good terms. That's a polite way to say, you were kind of fired, but we don't want to make a big thing about it because we might want to work with you in the future. But anyway, people were like, maybe Angelina Jolie will direct, or maybe she'll direct Captain Marvel. I have to say, if you've seen Unbroken, you would not be really promoting Angelina Jolie to direct any of these movies. Not to say she's a bad director, but she's not ready. She's not ready, and I also don't think she'd have any interest in directing these movies unless she starred in them. I think Angelina Jolie likes to kick ass personally, but I think she has very little interest in doing it from behind the camera. She wants to be a prestige. It's kind of like when Steven Spielberg was like, I want an Oscar. She already has one, but he was like, I'm going to start making movies like Schindler's List, which, I think his serious work is very good. But he kind of moved away from what made him famous, which, of course, was the popcorn blockbuster, which I have to say, he is an artist when it comes to that. And I do kind of feel that he shouldn't have such a derogatory view of his own work. But anyway, so they decided, so they didn't get Angelina Jolie, thank goodness. And although Angelina Jolie has a very strong relationship with Legendary right now, so if she directs any popcorn flicks, it's going to be for Legendary Universal. So they got Patty Jenkins, which was, I think, a pretty easy choice considering that's the woman director who was supposed to do Thor 2, Thor the Dark World, but parted that film over creative differences. And her name had come up. Maybe the people at Warner Brothers were just, reading the paper, covering their own story. And they were like, this is like what happened to Patty Jenkins. And they were like, we can write that wrong. Maybe someone will read Edgar Wright's poor story and hire him. But they didn't feel that way over at Paramount when they were getting a director for Star Trek 3, unfortunately. But I actually have to say, I still feel that Neil Marshall would be a fantastic choice for this, as when I first covered the Wonder Woman director story, as one of you pointed out, they were like, you said a man should do it. And I still do feel that I don't think this should become some, I think if you have a female director, you really run the risk of this becoming like too feminist a project, which is a concern for me, both as someone who likes to see these movies do well and as a viewer. Nobody wants, I think that's why feminism kind of got like a bad image, the whole we hate men angle, which is totally not true and counterproductive. So I worry about that, and that some people feel that took over Maleficent. I can see that argument. I don't agree with it. I think that movie isn't malicious. Maleficent isn't malicious, but I can see why someone would think that it would be. And it was, I think, a slight problem, and someone at the studio, Disney, should have caught that. So Patty Jenkins, though, if you had to pick a female director, I think she's actually a pretty good choice. Why? Because she directed Monster. And that is, won Charlize Theron the Oscar, and also started Charlize Theron on a very interesting career path, which I think we're seeing bear some wonderful fruit with Mad Max. So I like the grittiness and the violence and the, that she doesn't try and make a pretty movie or to make everything look, heroic and beautiful. She's willing to get into the dirt. And that's a Wonder Woman I'd be interested in seeing. I think that's a Wonder Woman we need to see. I think for too long, Wonder Woman has been like, kind of Angelina Jolie, the delegate to the UN, who, vogues and kicks butt and is like, on woman's world, we don't have these problems. I wonder why that is. Is it because we don't have any men? And then she just makes everybody awkward in the room, and they're like, why do we invite her to these things? So I don't want that Wonder Woman. I don't like what Wonder Woman has become to some degree. There's an old saying, they're like, oh, well, when you take DC's Trinity, Batman's the police officer, Superman's the fireman, and Wonder Woman is the teacher. And I've said this before, and I'm like, teacher doesn't fit with that group of people. And why would the woman be the teacher? With all due respect to teachers, that's not an analogy that goes along firefighter and police officer. I always felt, and I've said this before, so if you've heard this before, I hope you still agree with me, that Wonder Woman should be the military. She should be the army. So you've got Batman and Superman acting on a little bit more of a personal level, a community level, I guess you could say. And I think Wonder Woman, because she didn't grow up here, she came from Themyscira, she's not familiar with man's world. She is like, an impartial military, she comes in shock and awe. And I think they're exploring that pretty interestingly. Well, who knows what's going to happen after Convergence. Although it's a good time to be a DC fan. I'm enjoying Convergence. As I said when I first picked it up, I tweeted this out. It's like, hello, old friend. DC old continuity. I've missed you so. But I liked what Peter Tomasi started to do in the Wonder Woman, Superman Wonder Woman comic, exploring the differences in their personas. It was very good. So that's what I'd like to see with Wonder Woman, and I feel Patty Jenkins has the potential to bring that out. So I'm actually kind of excited about her hiring, and I hope that she has interesting creative ideas that don't end up being differences. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now the second story of the day is about Chris Pratt. Every story is almost about Chris Pratt. This guy is such a strong Hollywood commodity. Before Guardians of the Galaxy, I made a talent watch about him, and I felt this guy has star written all over him. I think that he has incredible charisma and a great look. I think he's attractive to women and guys who are attracted to men. He's very handsome, but I think he's also relatable to those who just want to have a beer with him. I think he's a really, really strong. He has a lot of potential. Now, when I saw Guardians of the Galaxy, of course, as you know, I did not particularly care for the film, and one of the problems I had was Chris Pratt's characterization of Star-Lord. I thought he was a little crass, and, not my idea of a leading man. Now, he's a lot of people's idea of a leading man, so even though I don't personally care for him, if I ran a studio, I'd be like, get me Chris Pratt, because a lot of people do enjoy his work. Although, considering the Jurassic World clip that we recently saw, where he was also kind of being a little bit of a man's man, a little bit overly crass, I'm concerned a little bit. I hope that doesn't become a rut that he gets stuck in. I'd be like, so you just kind of play the douche that high-fives everybody when they make a lame, inappropriate joke at someone else's expense? And he's like, yep, that's what I do. And, hey, to be fair, there does seem to be an audience for that. And so that's just my interpretation of what he's doing. And we'll see. I would hate to see him, lose so much potential. Because I could see the Indiana Jones thing that people would like to see happen. And I know Chris Pratt can be wonderful. I mean, some people are saying his Andy from Parks and Recreation was a little bit crass. I never saw that. I thought he was very sweet. And I really liked him on Parks and Recreation, actually. I thought he was wonderful. And he and Aubrey Plaza's relationship was one of my favorite things about that show when I watched it. I didn't stay with it. But so I was a Chris Pratt fan. Now I'm on the fence, and we'll see what happens. But Hollywood is definitely a Chris Pratt fan, and he has a project moving forward, which is very interesting because it isn't something you would expect him to do considering all the large properties he's being offered. I actually do think he'd be wonderful in that the Passenger, whatever it's called. I think it starts with an S actually, but it's that sci-fi romance with Jennifer Lawrence potentially, where they're traveling to a distant planet in a cryogenic sleep or whatever, and he accidentally is woken up and he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life alone on the ship because that's how long it takes to get there. So he wakes up another passenger to keep him company. I think that's a great movie. I think it's a perfect movie for Chris Pratt, unless he was like incredibly crass when he woke her up, and then you'd be like, again, Chris Pratt, really? But anyway, he's making a movie that sounds pretty interesting, although I wonder if it's going to continue his streak at the box office. He's taking a gamble on his own appeal. And anyway, it's called The Real McCoy, and it's a movie about how that expression originated. And apparently it was during Prohibition, where there was this guy named McCoy who was making liquor that wasn't watered down. It's apparently a very interesting story. There's a writer on it and a producer, and they pitched Chris Pratt, and Chris Pratt was like, love it, I want to be in it. And so Chris Pratt was such a strong person to attach to this that it started a bidding war, and it ended up going to Universal. So I think that's very, very interesting. And in fact, it was such an intense bidding war that happened so quickly that it made headlines because of that. And I think all of that has to do with Chris Pratt. And I think it's very interesting. I'm curious if you guys think Chris Pratt is the box office draw that Hollywood thinks him to be. I think Jurassic World will decide this, and I think he's smart to sign all these deals before Jurassic World comes out. That's the beauty of Hollywood. Films have to be positioned so far in advance that you can get your next project or a couple of projects off of the hype of one, and even if the project with the hype doesn't deliver, you've got like one or maybe two or three more chances to second chances to prove yourself again and get another high from the box office, and then the cycle starts all over again. So Chris Pratt's definitely playing the game. And by the way, on a side note, he's one of those talent people who moved from CAA to UTA with that recent upheaval with agents. So interesting stuff going on there indeed. Now, the third story of the day, this is a big story, and some of you might think it should even be the lead story. And that's that Robert Kirkman's Skybound imprint that has a deal with Image Comics now has a deal with Universal Pictures. And it's interesting to see Robert Kirkman trying to position himself to be perhaps on par with Mark Miller in getting properties out there. Now, Boom Studios also has to deal with Fox, and you're seeing other comic book companies. Ani for a while was making a lot of movies, but none of them really worked out, and the Sixth Gun TV show didn't really materialize for them, so they faded away. But it's interesting to see other comic book publishers outside of the big two, Marvel and DC, really, get taken into Hollywood and, work with Hollywood. And they're actually almost becoming like development departments in genre filmmaking for the studios. Very interesting. But instead of a company, this, like Mark Miller with Robert Kirkman, is where an individual, a name, is really making a deal with. I mean, it's Skybound's the name of the company, but it's a Robert Kirkman deal. So this is very interesting for a couple of reasons. Now, one is that everybody's saying, does this mean we're going to get a Walking Dead movie? And I wouldn't be surprised, because Walking Dead is so successful and has numbers that are so incredibly impressive on AMC whenever it airs that I think a movie is a natural progression, especially when you see Entourage, you see Sex and the City, HBO properties making that leap, and potentially Game of Thrones. I'm in favor of a Game of Thrones movie. I know some of you aren't, but I feel in this day and age, a big giant blockbuster is a good, I think it is, I do feel it's a natural progression, and it's good for the property, and I think it's good. I think if we can maybe, the more the line between movies and TV gets blurred, like look what's happening with Netflix's Daredevil, I think maybe the quality will just, shake out and go everywhere, right? Maybe some of the problems with movies will be fixed, and some of the problems with TV will be fixed. We'll just make it a giant bag of fun. So anyway, I also wanted to bring up, Walking Dead movie, I'm curious how you guys feel about a potential Walking Dead movie. But then also it would have to be the end though, right? How do you go back to the TV show? You could try and do like a Dark Tower thing where they do movies and TV simultaneously, but I think that's really hard to do. But I also wanted to talk about some of the other Robert Kirkman projects that are going on, apparently, that are in development. Just put them on your radar. For instance, he made a sci-fi movie with Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead and Jimon Hansu about these guys who work at a place where they have frozen bodies. And so that's interesting. It could be a little Moon-like. I love Moon! Moon is so good. Duncan Jones. I'm so excited for Warcraft. Alright, so that's very cool. Then also, he has something on Cinemax called Outcast. Cinemax won a bidding war for that series. And what's interesting, you might be like, Cinemax? But The Knick is on Cinemax from Steven Soderbergh, and it's amazing. If you haven't seen The Knick, watch The Knick. Talk about TV being as good as film. that for sure is one of those shows. And then also AMC has Thief of Thieves. AMC wants another project. They're like, we did so well with Walking Dead, why not bring you over for this as well? Although I have to say I didn't like the Thief of Thieves comic. I dropped it after one issue. And then also Sci-Fi has a project called Clone. So he's very prolific. He isn't quite at the point where Mark Miller is, signing projects left and right after the success of Kingsman: The Secret Service. And I think that of course, was off of Kick-Ass. But I think that Robert Kirkman needs another solid hit after Walking Dead to prove he's not a one-trick pony. So he needs one more hit, and then I think he's golden. But he's on his way with this deal. All right, so on to the viewer question from Evie Brudenall. And Evie said, "Hi, Grace. I have been watching Beyond the Trailer for almost 2 years now." Oh, that means so much, Evie. Thank you. And I watch it every single day after school. You know, since a lot of you tell me you watch this after school or before you go to bed, that's why sometimes even when I'm late with the show, I make sure I get it up. So thank you for telling me when you watch it, because it does make a difference in what I do on my end. So I wanted to make sure that people like Evie and others had a show today to watch. So she continues saying, "I recently tweeted you and bemoaned that I could never think of a good question to ask, but I think I might finally have one." All right, I think you do, Evie. That's why I picked it. And so she says, "Now that Mark Ruffalo has revealed that the rights to a solo Hulk film belong to Universal, and the likelihood of Marvel Disney ever acquiring the rights or forging a deal between the two as companies is low," I really mushed that up. Sorry. So basically I'm sorry, I'm still a little tired from last night. So basically what she's saying is, as we discussed earlier on Morning Movie News this week, since Universal has the rights, and it's unlikely Disney will make a deal like they did with Sony, especially because I think they might try and wait the clock out on Universal. As I've said before, Sony owns part of the rights to Spider-Man the character. That's why Marvel is more willing to be open with them and make deals, while they aren't with other studios. So I think that's very interesting. So that's why they waited for Daredevil to come back. They were like, "We'll just wait you out. We've got other stuff to do. Don't worry about it." So the Hulk having a solo movie looks pretty much like a non-existent, at least while Mark Ruffalo is playing the character. So Evie continues saying, "In what capacity do you think Bruce Banner / Hulk should continue to be used throughout the MCU? I am a huge fan of Mark Ruffalo's portrayal of Bruce Banner Hulk and would love to see him featured more prominently in the MCU. I hope you answer this question. Evie, smiley face." Great question. And I have to say, from a fan perspective, I'd love to see him as the love interest in a Black Widow movie. Wouldn't that be great if Hulk and Black Widow teamed up for they wouldn't have solo movies, but they'd have like team movies? They could be the Nick and Nora Charles of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Although I believe it will be Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne. Whoever those two crazy kids might be, because they're not Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. But anyway, that's, I think, a real Marvel fan nitpick, and I think that movie fans will hopefully fall in love with Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne, as they should. And I think they can with Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly. I think they're a great couple. But anyway, here, I agree. I think the great thing about Mark Ruffalo's portrayal of the Hulk is his Bruce Banner is so fascinating. He's so tortured, and also he has a little bit of a playful, mean side to him, too. Like, for instance, when he was first introduced in the Avengers, when he tested Black Widow to see what she would do. I think that's a great invention from Joss Whedon, and I do wonder about the character's future when Joss Whedon is no longer in charge of him. I think it'll be interesting to see what the Russo brothers choose to do. They're a little more serious, and that could maybe work to the Hulk's advantage, if we see maybe a little more Hulk smash as a result. Very, very curious indeed. But I would like to see more of a focus on Bruce Banner. I guess, Evie, that's my answer to your question. I want to see more of Mark Ruffalo play the role. Also because, when he's the Hulk, as I've said before, I don't see Mark Ruffalo in there. I just see a really good CGI effect. And for instance, in the recent clip with Black Widow, trying to, ingratiate herself with the Hulk, which was very interesting. It was like almost animalistic, so you're almost like, maybe this isn't an appropriate idea, but it's super hot. But anyway, I think that, I'm not a big fan of the special effect Hulk, and I think he's cool for action sequences, but I don't think he's so great for the talky scenes. So that's why it's so wonderful to have Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner. So I would love, I wish that he could have his own solo movie. I think Planet Hulk is great. I think there are some great stories about Bruce Banner going on the road, trying to stay away from people so he doesn't get angry. But I think it'll be interesting to see which side he chooses in Civil War. And I think that Bruce Banner is someone who deals a lot with horror more than anyone else. I mean, he's the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Mr. Hyde character, right? He's someone who, it's not just the horror of what's out there, it's the horror of what's inside. So I want to see that personal drama explored more. I want to see the tortured aspect of the romance with Black Widow. I think that's what's going to make that very appealing. And I just want to see lots of Mark Ruffalo. And I'll be curious to see what movies he can show up in. He can't be in Thor Ragnarok, right? And like Black Widow getting to be in so many of the Captain America Winter Soldier and the upcoming Civil War, there's less solo movies to be in, and I think that I don't see him teaming up with anybody like Black Widow was teamed up with Captain America. So he's in a tough position. He's in a really tough spot. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if there is a space for him. I don't know. But thank you for your question, Evie. I hope I was able to shed some light on it. Please share your own thoughts down below. Everybody, please write down what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. And it was a little shorter than usual, like about a minute. But, we had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I really love talking movies with you guys. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.